Right, so that's not, there we go. That's what I wanted. Yeah, so welcome. As I mentioned, we're going to play around with some data here. And so I have the problem set 2 pulled up, the data set. And again, if you want to follow along, we'll do some of these, we'll play around with some of the tasks. Not the ones for your problem set, but things that are similar and probably will help you. And in fact, there's a couple things in the data set that are somewhat tricky that it'll save you a lot of Googling if you do stick with us. Yeah. So, but as normal, if you have questions, please jump in and ask. Yeah, because again, I have some things that I'd like to cover, but we have time to kind of digress and talk about other things. So, let me figure out where I am on these monitors. All right, so I'm just gonna get rid of these. If you're following along, or if you want to play around with this data, it might make more sense to just make a new copy or resave this before. That way you'll feel free to kind of mess around with the data and then go back to kind of the clean data as you start working on the problem set, if you haven't already. And so just before we get into the weeds here, remember your Connect assignment is due tonight, and then the problem set is due Sunday. The Connect assignment, so in the lecture I mentioned that I wasn't going to test you on the specifics of how to find quartiles when they fall in between. My computer is running really hot right now, so there's a little, if I look like a badly dubbed movie, that's why. Anyway, I told you I wasn't going to test you, and then in the problem set, sure enough, or in the Connect assignment, sure enough, I left a question in there that required you to calculate. So I went ahead and just gave full credit on, I think it's question 6. So if you were struggling with that, I apologize. The answer is what we expect from the book. You find the percentage of the distance between the two values, but I had intended to not force you to really dig into the weeds there. So I apologize for anybody that spent a lot of time on that. So that was mess up number 1. Mess up number 2 is if you downloaded this problem set file right away when I posted on, say, Tuesday, or anytime before midday Wednesday, you might have downloaded it as a CSV file because I mistakenly saved it as a CSV, or a comma separated variable file. And that's all well and good, except it didn't bring with it the text box. So if you opened up the problem set just now and it didn't have the text box, that's probably the issue. And if you go back to Canvas and re-download it, that should fix it. You should be able to see the text box, the one that I've deleted. So in this case, but there should be a text box out in column P or Q or something. So comma separated variables, or .csv files, are very common in data. They work between all kinds of different statistical programs. You can open it in anything, and it's a more compact way to store the data, but it doesn't carry with it the specifics of that file. So the text box in Excel is an extra kind of information that Excel brings with, and it's not the data. So it is now saved as a .xlsx file, or the Excel type of file, which you also can open in basically any statistical package or program. It's just, I think if you look at the file size, you'll notice it's bigger. So so if you, again, short story long, if you downloaded it on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, you may need to re-download the file. Okay, so let's play around with this data a little bit. And what we have here is the ticket list, or the passenger list for the Titanic. Okay, and so I've shortened this up a little bit, or I took out a few of the variables that we won't focus on, but and I tried to rename. So originally this was named gender. Again, it's more descriptive if we especially with a 1-0 variable, if we put it as 1-0 and name it the one that is 1. But in general, when you open up a data set, and if it's a large data set, oftentimes it'll come with kind of a data. I'm just going to open it up. I haven't posted this, but I'll probably will post this to Canvas. It has kind of some information about it, and specifically we'll rely on this residence information. So there's usually a kind of descriptive file that goes with, to make sure that you know what specifically is in the various data set or variables. Okay, so not all of these are in there, but yeah. Okay, so now jumping into the data, and again, on your problem set, I have you work through some specific questions. We won't go through those exact ones here, but the first thing is I'm just going to clean up this data a little bit, or make this easier to read. I'm going to, well, this computer is really running slow. So I don't need to know everybody's full name, so I'm just going to shorten that up. Same here, I kind of know what those variables mean, and so on. Now, I'm going to, as we notice, this is a lot of data. Okay, so this is going to be cumbersome to deal with. There are, if we scroll down, if my computer will do it, we have something like 1,310, so 1,309 observations. Again, Excel can hold, a million or so, but in any case, this is a lot to digest. So a couple things we could do. Now, we can use the freeze panes. Okay, so I suggest this on your problem set, is you probably want to set it up to go ahead and view and use the freeze panes. And in this case, I would probably just freeze the top row. I don't actually care if I lose track of what class it is. And that way, when we're scrolling through, we can still remain aware of, okay, this is the age variable, and so on. Additionally, we can do something called hiding values, or hiding rows. Yeah, there is some specific values in here, right? So somebody, I guess, well, when you have a child, I think you start counting in months. So what is this? This is 5/6, so 10-month-old, and this must be 11. But yeah, so that's important to kind of notice, is that we assume this is in years, but we're not necessarily going to have integers. And if we're assuming these are all on the round number, that can be tricky when we go to visualize the data. We might not have values fall exactly where we expect. So step one, before we even start freezing it, is exactly what Emily did, was to start looking around at the data. So if we want to just kind of show the data, but we don't want this huge wall, we can do something called hiding rows, or hiding values. Rows, I guess. Now, and we'll talk in a little bit how this can sometimes create some issues. But first, before we do that, there are some handy shortcuts in Excel. I realize I'm not quite showing all of this. Just open that up. Okay. When we want to jump around in our data, we can use the arrow keys, right? So I'm moving around the data just using the arrow keys on my pad. Now, if I want to jump to various ends, I can use, I'm going to hold Control down and then hit the arrow key to the right, that way. And that's going to jump me all the way to the end of the row. Okay, and I can hit left and right and back and forth. So I can use that to quickly get to the bottom of my data as well. So holding Control, hitting down, all of a sudden I'm down at the bottom. Okay, and so that's a really handy trick. Again, that was holding Control. If you're on a Mac, there's a similar key to hold. I don't know exactly what it is, but a quick Google would get you that answer. I can hold Control and jump up to the top. Now, it didn't jump me my view up there because I've frozen the pane, so I'm up there technically, but I don't see the top of my data. So I can use just, I'm not holding Control anymore, I'm just hitting down, and that's going to put me into cell C2 and bring the view up there. Okay, so again, getting familiar with Control and the arrow keys is helpful. When you want to select data, you can do a similar thing. We can use the arrow keys, but this time I'm going to hold Shift and use the arrow keys. And you can notice that selecting the data as I move around. Okay, all in kind of relation to the first cell that I was in. So that can be quite handy if you want to grab some data and be kind of specific about it. Now we can combine these two. Okay, so I'm going to hold Control and Shift. So I'm still on E6. I'm going to hold Control and Shift. Again, there's a similar version in Mac. And then I'm going to hit the right arrow key and go to the edge of the data. Okay, and so in one click, I've now selected that whole area. I can kind of go back and forth. I can release both hands off. I still have that selected. I can go back, and now I'm going to hold Shift and kind of back up a little bit. Okay, I don't have Control this time. I just have Shift. I can continue to use just Shift. I can then go back, hold Control, Shift, and select all of them. Okay, so takes a little practice to get used to, but a very handy way to move around your data. The Shift, the Control Shift, and so on. So again, I can do that. So now I'm up here at the top of my data. I'm going to hold Control, Shift, and then click down. And now I have the whole column selected. Okay, and again, now I've released my hands, but I can go back, hold Shift. Maybe I don't want that last value or the last view. Okay. So again, especially with a data set this large, it's often much easier than, for instance, using the mouse. If I go down here and I click on the last value, and now I want to do the top value. Okay, here I go. I'm going to be scrolling for a while. I can sit here for, okay, that didn't take too long, but yeah. So the arrow keys, Control and Shift, are quite useful. So I said we could hide data, which is where I started this whole conversation with. So if I click, I can click. Another thing is to click on the row or up on the column number. That's going to select the whole data. If I click on line 31 here, I now have all of the rows to wherever that is, or all the columns all the way over. If I hold Control Shift and click down, I've now got the rest of that data selected. Okay, and I'm gonna back this up one. So I'm just holding Shift, clicking up, and now I have whatever that is, row 31 to 1309 selected. And I'm gonna right click, again with Mac, I think it's the Open Apple or whatever they call that now, the apple with the bite out of it. I think if you hold that and click, but I'm gonna right click, and we see some options here, and I'm gonna go ahead and hide this data. Okay, and so now when we scroll up, if we look at our row number here, I go from 27, 28, 29, 30, and then all of a sudden 1310. Okay, so there is data still in the data set here, but it's now hidden. That could be, there we go. And so that can be an easy way to kind of scrunch up the data so that you can kind of see it a little more clearly. So you may find value in doing that. Now, I do warn you that there are a couple downsides to this. Number one, sometimes when you try to insert charts, it won't carry with it that hidden data unless you go in and specifically tell it to do so. So you might put in a bar chart and it really only grabs the, whatever it is, 30 observations here and not all 1,309. Secondly, if you have some charts or text boxes in there, in that space that's hidden. So I'm going to actually unhide this. So if you have hidden data, you can kind of grab on the outsides of it and then click unhide, and that's going to bring all that data back. So we haven't deleted the data, but if I had, say, so I'm just going to insert a text box. My computer will let me. There we go. So I have a text box here, and now if I'm clicking somewhere. Actually, let me just click in here. I'm going to hold Control-Shift down, select all of that data. I'm going to back it up again just so we know that there was that other value down there, or that other row. I come back up here, and all of a sudden my text box is condensed. So it's hidden all of the information in those rows. So you do want to be mindful of that. Hiding data can be helpful, but it can lead you down weird directions as well. You can, of course, hide columns. And this is probably, I would say this is done a little more commonly. So maybe you're working in a data set and right now you just do not care if we know how many parents or children or spouses are there. You can right click again and hide this. That data is still there, but you have a little more compact view here. And again, to bring that back, just kind of drag on the outsides of it and go ahead and unhide. Okay, and I'm going to unhide this again. And my text box does come back. So if I had information there, it's not gone. It's just also crunched. Okay, so just things to be mindful of as we try to move around larger data sets. Again, the Control-Shift, clicking around, very helpful, especially when we're trying to select data. If you want to, calculate the average of something, rather than clicking and dragging, trying to pull all the way down, it's much easier to use Control and Shift. Realize we're kind of zoomed out. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. And okay. So all right. Yeah. So the other way we might find helpful to look at our data, I'm just going to delete this text box, is to, again, put this into a table format. Okay, so I've just clicked somewhere in my data here, and I'm going to go up and just simply format it as a table. Okay, and you can have a whole bunch of different options. And it wants to know, double check that it's got the right kind of range there. And I do have headers. And now we're in this form again. It's likes to expand it there again. I'm gonna shorten this up. I know that I'm talking about siblings on board and not just number of siblings. So it's expanded my data a little bit, partially because it's added in this little tool for me, and I think we talked about this on a previous video or previous lecture, but we have now the ability in this table to select what we want to show in the table. Okay, so we can quickly look at, for instance, maybe we only want to look at the females. We're at the bottom of our data. But now we've shortened that up, and we're only talking about the females. Okay, and we can go back and put those in. We can also quickly sort. So I can sort smallest to largest in age, and we can see all the babies here. There's, what is this, 2 months? And so a pretty handy way to play around with your data is to go ahead and just put it in a table, and let Excel do a lot of the work for you. Again, all of this could largely be done with some formulas and other things like that, but Excel is getting pretty good at helping us out along the way. So so to show kind of, we can filter, so that I think, yeah, so filters here, we can use more than one at a time. So we might, for instance, we have data from the Titanic here. Maybe we are curious about if we can find Rose, or is that what her name was starting off? I don't know. Maybe we can find who Rose is modeled after, right? So obviously we could filter like we did. We want to just look at the females. What else do we know about Rose? We know, so here's class. We know she was a first class citizen. I apologize if I'm spoiling the movie for you all. But we had a first class female. We knew we know she had a parent on board, so it wasn't zero. I don't think she had children, but we can do that. So we could select survived, although we maybe want to be careful, because I think, at least in the movie, she pretends like she died and takes a new name, so she might be. But we do know her age. Well, somebody probably knows her age. Maybe if you've seen the movie enough, you know. But I know she's not 2, and I guess I don't know her exact age. I think the movie hopes she's not that young, but I don't know. She's somewhere in this range, probably. And then, so we're down to what, 10 or 12 options. So if you recall, now I closed it, but that data file, or the data description file, told us that, let's see if I can find, we're gonna need to look at it again. I may not be able to find it quickly, but I can tell you that one was the residence was British. Okay, and I'm pretty sure at least Kate Winslet's accent was British. So let's go ahead and assume that, and so we can go ahead and filter down to just the British, and I think 0 might have been American and 2 is other, or the other, vice versa. And here we have Miss Elsie Edith Bowerman. Okay, so that's our best guess as to who Rose could be named after. Again, yeah. So maybe they probably took some changed a little bit from the story, but that's our best guess. So we can go back and kind of undo these. You'll notice the ones that we have filtered look a little bit different. We could probably try to look for Jack, although my guess is that's less selective. Although we do know, don't think he had parents with children with. But anyway, not that this is always useful. Yeah, there's a lot more going on here. So, going to be trickier to find to narrow down a male third class passenger. Okay, so just some of the use of the filters. Let's get our data back. We now care about all of these little babies. Oh, and it's just sorted. Okay. Okay. So, yeah. So I wanted to walk through again. Let's do. I think in your problem set I have you maybe even do a histogram. So let's walk through that practice again. We're gonna do a histogram, or we'll try to do a histogram of the fare. Okay, so we have the price that everybody paid. Let's go ahead. We can just sort. Let's sort smallest to largest. Apparently, I don't know how, but some people got on free, including all types of passengers. So, I don't know what that's about, but we can quickly, so we could look at, so we know we need to stretch our histogram from 0. Again, we could plug in equals max of the fare, right? And that's going to tell us 512. So we need our histogram to stretch to 512. We could also just, again, if I hold control and hit down, I'm going to go down here. We do have somebody that we don't have a value for. Okay, and we'll come back to that here in a minute, but I want you to take note of that there is a missing value. And in fact, this you're going to need to know for the assignment. So we have a few people paying a whole lot of money. This is upwards of I was gonna, let's see. I just pulled up an inflation calculator here, and that apparently something around 515, and I know this only goes back to 1913 for some reason, but in 1912 probably similar. We're talking $13,000 worth of a fare there. So those people were living well. Okay, so again, just make note that there is this, I'm in the way of it. There is a missing value here down on fare. And that, again, is going to come into play not only here, but in your problem set. And we'll talk about what's going on here and an error message that we're going to get. But in the meantime, let's set up, and I just pull control to jump around in the data set here. Let's set up our bins, right? So we need to make our bins. We're going to go ahead and use the data analysis tool pack, and we'll walk through how to install that here in a minute. So, but first we need bins. We need to account for, we have 1,309 observations, or N equals 1,309. Remembering now, go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. And we need our rule. We want 2 to the k to be greater than n. Right? And so I don't have that all memorized, but we can use Excel. So let's see, 2 equals 2 to the, what's 2 to the 10th? 1024. So we need 2 to the 11th would be larger, right? So a good default, and this actually might turn out pretty well. Yeah, so 2 to the 11th is larger. So our kind of rule of thumb tells us to start at 11 bins. And we know we need to stretch from 0, because some of our people got on scot-free, and we need to get larger than 512. Okay, and we probably want to go in some nice round numbers, and so we can do, well, we don't need a 0, but if we did 50, 100, let's see if Excel can pick up on what I'm doing here. Sure enough. Okay, so I think if we do something like this, how many is that? 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. So that turns out pretty well. So those would be the bins I would start with. Okay, and so now we have our bins, and we're going to use the data analysis tool pack. Maybe it might just be easier if, whoop. I'm going to try to move myself. Slide over here. Okay. So we're going to use the data analysis tool pack. And so if you don't have that, or if you've just downloaded or installed Excel, or if you're using the VDI, so if you've been having trouble with Excel, I'll post the walkthrough to download the VDI, where essentially you take over a computer here on Hamlin, and that has with it Excel and a whole host of other programs as well. So, and it's pretty slick. You just download a little app or program and log in with your credentials, and it opens up in a new window, and you can control that computer's or that on the server that version of Excel. So anyway, if you do that, you probably will need to do this every time, but it's quite quick. If we just go to File and we do Options, now I move myself and now I'm in the way again. If we do Options, we'll get this to pop up. Again, it's in Add-ons. Okay, down here, Excel Add-ins. I say Add-ons, Add-ins. Click Go, and you have this box pop up. Mine is already selected, but go ahead and click that Analysis Tool Pack. You don't need the VBA one for these purposes. And I don't know if all of these are default or if I added any of those, but the Analysis Tool Pack is a default available add-in. So just click that, hit OK, and then when you go to the Data tab, up here on the ribbon, you'll see Data Analysis. Okay, so just to refresh, that's File, down here on Options, and the way bottom, we see this pop up. We go to Add-ins, click the Go, and we make sure that's checked box is okay. And now we have that Data Analysis Tool Pack. Okay, so we can go into that, right? And we saw the other day that we can do things like descriptive statistics and whatnot. We're going to do histogram. Okay, I have something already in here, but we're going to want to select our input range. Now, a word of just general warning is that I think Excel, and there's probably solutions to this, but Excel sometimes has issues when you use the labels function. Sometimes stuff doesn't pop up quite as cleanly. So a lot of times you can just leave that off, not use the label, and then go in and add your own labels. So we are interested in the fair here. So I'm going to click. I'm up here in I2, and now I'm going to hold Control Shift and click down. Okay, and that's grabbed all of that data. And then I need to select my bin range. So I need to get back up. So actually what I'm going to do, we can start down here. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to click the last value, hold Control Shift up, and select it this way. Hold Shift and pop down. Okay, so either way, I just want to grab that data, but trying to use the Control Shifts in a way that I don't have to click and drag around the sheet. Okay, I need some bin ranges. It's in my way. So I want these to be my bins. Whoops. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So it might be slightly set up differently if you're on a Mac. That'd be my guess. Oh, go to more. So Emily has a potential solution for you. Yeah, so I don't know if there's a... Oh, yeah, so hopefully Emily's solution. So go to more, and then the option should pop up. See if that works. And if not, let me know and we can troubleshoot that further. So I'm going to grab my bins here. Okay, and then I'm gonna put it in this worksheet. It's fine to put it in a new worksheet as well. but I'm just going to have it spit it out over here. And now this is, I think, going to yell at me. I want the chart output on because I do want that histogram, but I'm anticipating it's going to yell at me, and then we'll talk about why that is. Okay, so I'm getting an error that says histogram input range contains non-numeric data. I have something that's not a number in this data. And initially, you might think, well, maybe I have the label up here selected. And if you did select the label and didn't click the label box, it would likely also yell at you. But, and this is going to be true for your problem set as well, or I think on age there's some of this too. But remember I said there was somebody without why am I zoom? My computer is not happy. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to cancel this. So remember we talked that there was a value down here. I'm going to just jump to the bottom. There's a value down here that's missing. Now, missing data in a data set comes in a variety of forms. Oftentimes it's just nothing in the cell. Sometimes you'll see a period. That's pretty common, is just a dot, or it's literally the period to indicate missing data. You'll sometimes see NA. But how we handle missing data is important to bear in mind. And if we go and try to figure out what's going on here, if we go, because we're in a table, we can see all the values, right? So these are all numerical values. Excel can treat those and put those into a bin. But if we scroll down, turns out that missing value is not actually, I want to say blank, but it's not actually empty. It's treated as a blank. And that is what's causing the issue here when Excel tries to, remember with that histogram, Excel is looking at each of these values and saying, okay, 262.375, that's within this bin. Let me put it in there. When it gets to the one that is treated as a blank, that's a character value. It's not numerical, so it doesn't know where to put it. So that's creating an issue. And there are a few ways we could go around or get around that. We could empty that out. We could do that manually, right? I think if we just well, I don't know exactly what we'd have to do. We could try around and try to put in either a period or something like that. But one thing we can do is just not include that in our selection of data. Okay, so I'm gonna just, well, let's go ahead and do the histogram. Okay, but this time I'm going to select only, and this is easiest to do when I have it sorted, right? So now, because it's sorted, this is the only value down here. I can, that's not what I want. I'm going to hold, oh, it is. I'm going to hold Control Shift and click up. It's going to grab all the way to the top. I don't want that last one, so I'm going to hold just Shift, go down one, and now I'm I2 to I1309. Could have typed that in as well. Okay, and so now I've grabbed the data, but I'm leaving off that one that's the issue. And I think now, I sure hope so, because otherwise I don't, yeah. So here we have, it spit out the data, or the frequency table, and it also spit out a histogram. Okay, so that's again something to be mindful, and it's our first entry into missing data, which turns out to be one of the most cumbersome but important aspects of data analysis. Is how do we treat people that don't answer, right? For some reason, this person didn't tell us, or we don't have written down what their fare was. Or as you'll see in the age variable, we just don't have data on certain people's ages. And so from a data analysis or a data, playing around with the data, we have to figure out how to deal with that. We're also going to have to be mindful of that when we think about our analysis and the statistical tools that we use and how we treat missing data, because it's not always kind of random. Sometimes there's some information there as to who's missing. And so we'll talk about that more when we get into later chapters in trying to run statistical tests. But the prevalence of missing data, it pops up quite often. Yeah, so just from the functionality of what can we do with our data, we have to be mindful of it. But an easy way is to just not select it in our data or in this analysis. Okay, so this histogram, we can clean it up a little bit, right? We can do some of this, format this, and we want to, histogram, we should have them bumping up to each other and so on. But notice that this may not be the best way to display this data, okay? Because what we really have, if we go back to the frequency table, nobody's paying this kind of middle, well, this is a lot of money, but nobody's paying these amounts, and we just have a small little sliver over here. So we might want to alter our bins, right? Again, our default is kind of stretch the whole range, but maybe we want to do something like 25, 50, 75, 100, and so on, right? So it's always worth a little time of looking around and seeing if this is actually how you want to display or present your data. And something like that. Okay, so we could just quickly histogram. Our data should still be grabbed here, but now we can change the bin, select our new bins, and let's just output it down here. And now we get this new one. Another word of caution is when you're doing, when you have a large data set like this, the chart output doesn't always come with and go in the same spot. So sometimes the chart output will be way down at the bottom of your data or something. But so this might give us a little better look. Still, maybe not. Maybe we've just determined that histogram isn't the best for this, because you can't really see even. I guess you can kind of see that there's some out there, but you don't know exactly how high they are. So yeah, but that's how you go about, again, putting a histogram in. Of course, you'd want to kind of rename it the histogram of passenger fare or something. Okay, so I want to turn to the big so just as a note on that, I think I'm adequately recording and audio is coming in. So this, I will post this later. I should have mentioned that at the start. So when you want to go back and look at how I did these things, it should be there available. And I think it'll be less fuzzy. So Zoom doesn't like my video input still. So I'll work on that for the future. Okay, I want to turn and talk about pivot tables, or as we learn them, contingency tables. And as we talked about the other day, they're really frequency tables, and two of them smushed together. So we're going to do that. And so I'm going to just click somewhere in my data. I'm going to go up and insert. Oh, yes. Okay, over here, pivot table. So you can try to use recommended pivot tables. I've almost never found Excel does very well at suggesting what I might be interested in. And really the benefit of the pivot table is the ability to manipulate it. So we're going to start with just a blank pivot table. And I'm going to go ahead and just put it in a new worksheet. So that's going to spit me out in a new worksheet down here. Maybe you can't see. I'm in the way again, but the sheet 1 down here. I guess it's probably, let's see, where am I? I'll come over here. Okay. So nothing's up here, but what we see is we have these pivot table fields, and this is where we're going to use, or where we're going to play around with, okay? So we're going to be dragging things into one of these 4 bins. And I do not have enough of the screen up here. I need to resize a little bit. Okay. Hopefully you can see. Okay, I think that grabs everything. And so we're going to be putting, these are our variables from our data set, and we're going to put it into one of these 4. Okay, so you can see we have columns and rows. We have filters, which we've already played around with. Now, we tend to use those a little less in pivot tables, but that is there. And then we have values. Okay, so in general, we're going to build something with rows and columns, and then put a type of value in those rows and columns. Okay, so I'm going to grab class. Okay, and I can click, and it's just going to put it in somewhere. But I want to be a little more selective. So I'm going to actually click and drag this, and I'm going to put it in my rows. Okay, and so what it's built for me there is, you can already start to see it's kind of designed the way that our frequency tables are. So I have class 1, 2, and 3. Now, I want, if I just want to build a frequency table, I can do it directly here. So I'm going to just grab any of these other ones we can work with. I'm going to just grab name. Now, it's not going to spit out all the names. It's going to default. So when I use a character variable, it's going to default to the count, which is handy because that's what I actually want here. So I have now a frequency table of the class, the passenger class here. So we can quickly see 709 third class passengers, 323 first class. Whoop. So if I click outside of that, I lose my, there, okay. I can always remove things. Okay, if I try to put name here, so it will actually list out everybody's name. Don't really want that. Okay, so again, I can use any of these. So I'm going to put age down here, default to the count. If I want to look at something, so I can, this is more flexible than just a frequency table, right? So a frequency table just counts up the numbers. I can do things like quickly find the average age. Okay, and the way I do that is over here in the value setting, I can do value field settings. Okay, when I click on that, I get this little box to pop up, and I can do a sum. That's not going to tell me much. I know that the sum of all the first class passenger ages is 11,000. Not really what I want, but I can come in here again. Let's go and do average. And now I know the average age of my first, second, and third class passengers. Okay, that's potentially much more useful. I know my third class passengers tended to be younger, and so on. Okay, I'm going to go back to count because I just want to know the number. But now I want to include another variable. Okay, so I'm gonna look at class, and then let's put female in here. And now I can put female in a couple different spots. I'm going to start in the rows, and then I'm going to move it to the columns later. So when I put it in the rows here, I now have each of these is now broken up. So it takes a little time to get used to this. I'm going to zoom in here. I apologize. We don't need to be that zoomed out. And one thing I might want to do here is, I remember that it's female 1, male 0. But if I'm showing this, I might want to change that up a little bit. Let's see. So one thing you can do is up in the design tab, I'm going to go ahead and change this to, I think outline form is a little more instructive. But I can change this. So this is class 1, and then I have male and female. So I have a total of class 1, and I have how many male and females there are. But I can change this and just have it say male, and it's actually going to update for all 3 of them. And this can say female, and maybe a little easier to read. So this is one way to display it, but this, I think it's a little easier to read if we go ahead and I'm going to drag this to the columns, and we're going to see what we have seen now in lecture as a frequency table or contingency table. 2 frequency tables, right? So we have the original class structure. Remember, there was 709 third class. so we have a frequency table if we just think about this data, but we also have a frequency table of male and female, knowing that there are 843 males and 466 females. Okay, so 2 frequency tables, but we also have the information that comes with doing this jointly, and that we have these inner 6 cells where these are AND statements. Okay, so this is, again, this is just counting up. It's a count of age, but it could be a count of anything. This cell here is male first class passengers. This is female first class passengers, and so on. Okay, so again, we can start to gain some more information here. We can quickly see, all right, there's, first class is pretty evenly split. There's a few more males, but up here we have over double the amount of males in third class. Okay, so we can start to gain some insight into our data set and our passengers more so than just either of the frequency tables. The frequency table tells us there's more males than females, and we know there's more third class, but we don't necessarily know how that relates. If we want, so these numbers are helpful, but we could actually, so I'm right-clicking in the data here, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go down to show values as, and right now there's no calculation, but I'm going to do percent of column total. Okay, and so what that's going to tell me is that, so this, we have to kind of think through of what's going on. We have a column total, so we have 100% of the males, and this lets us say 58% of the males are third class passengers. So another way to view the same data, they've done the calculation for us. We could have, of course, put this into a frequency table. This is a relative frequency table, right? I can do row total, right? And this is now talking about in terms of first class passengers. So 55% of first class passengers are males, and that increases, and we have almost 70% of third class passengers are males. So sometimes it's easier to just turn it into percentages. Again, that relative frequency, especially when we're talking large numbers, it's easier for our minds to kind of have that calculation done for us. And you can then we can just go ahead and do that as the grand total as well, right? So 37% of our passengers are male third class passengers. Okay, so all these 6 now are going to sum to 100%, and with it then we have actually what is the relative frequency tables, right? So here, males and females, we have the relative frequency, and again, same with the classes. Okay, so again, you can keep playing around with what goes in. Maybe we don't want female anymore. Maybe we want whether they're children. Okay, and we can get a sense for, it turns out that it looks like third class had a lot of the children compared to the other classes. Yeah, so we can go back again to, maybe we don't, we did that histogram of fair. Maybe we want to just look at fair. Okay, again, dropping and dragging them around. We can, again, here's our first, second, and third class, but we don't want count. Let's go in and do maybe the average. Okay, we can change this, bring down, we don't need, so on average, first class passengers paid $87. We know some of that's pulled from those 512s. Yeah, let me just jump back. So I'm going to go back and do count. Okay, so I don't need the decimals now, so oops. So I have a count here, but if I want to display that not as a count, but as a percentage of the total, I'm going to right-click in here. and go show values as, and we're going to do column total. We could do grand total because I just have the one value here, or one variable. But when I click that, it now brings it as percentage. Okay, so it's made that transition from there's too many repeated terms. It's made that transition from frequency table to relative frequency table, right? It's just done that last calculation where it's divided by the total. And so now we have 54% are third class. And I can go back and switch back to no calculation as well. Okay, you can get crazy and add in more and more things. Oftentimes you start to lose kind of the benefit of summarizing the data when you get, you know, more than two variables mixed in here. It can get a little tricky, but also is, yeah, you can play around with it. You can always, you know, we have one table here. That's not what I wanted to do. We can insert another pivot table, right? I'd need to go back and select my data again. But we have another pivot table. Okay, so we can be playing around with more than one pivot table at a time. Maybe I want to know what boat they're in, and so on. If there was a body, that's maybe not as helpful. I think if they made it into a boat, I thought they wouldn't count as a body. But anyway, we'd have to look at the specifics of what's going on there. But so that's a quick introduction to pivot tables. Again, I know I'm pretty sure the Excel training talks about pivot tables as well. But yeah, as I may have mentioned, it turns out to be quite a powerful tool. We can even go to the extent of you can play around with you can show or put in what am I trying to say? You can put in charts directly from the pivot table as well. So that can be a quick way to jump in. There it is, pivot charts. So you can grab the data or be just within this, and it can quickly start to give you different types of charts. Although not all of them can be used directly there, but yeah. So a quick way to get charts up and going as well is to go into pivot tables. So that is hopefully going to give you some assistance, especially when you turn to the assignment. Again, what I talked about here, we have age with some of these missing, but in this term it's classified as blank. So you probably want to think about, again, the easiest is probably to sort the data and then not select that in your kind of output. Yeah, it does, and I don't know if this would happen if it wasn't a blank. We can use age, even though there's a lot of missing values here. I can use age and it still counts as 1309. So I'm not actually sure if that's true, if those are true kind of missing values, if it would count that up. Something to try out. So I think we'll end there. I will be around. I'll stay on here for a couple minutes to answer any questions. And then I do have office hours again this afternoon in like an hour. So from 1:30 to 2:30, I'll be back in this room, and you can jump on and ask questions as well. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. And yeah, again, so I'll either see you in an hour or see you in a few days or sometime.